त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणी यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनः यस्यान्तं न विदुःसुरासुरगणाः देवाय तस्मै नमः देवाय तस्मै नमः. Let's do maybe let's do the first 8 verses of the 4th chapter. So if you could follow me. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavanaham Avyayam Vivasvan Manave Praha Manurikshvakave Bravid Evam Parampara Praptim Imam Rajarshayo Viduhu Sakale Nehamahata Yogo Nashtaf Parantapa Sa evayam maya tedya Yogaf Proktaf Puratanaha Bhaktosi me sakha cheti Rahasyam hetaduttamam Arjuna Uvacha Aparam bhavato janma Param janma vivasvataha Katham etad vijaniyam Tvamadau proktavaniti Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Bahuni me vyatitani Janmani tava charjuna Tanyaham veda sarvani Natvam vetha parantapa Ajopi san avyayatma Bhutanam Ishvaropi san Prakirtim swamadhisthaya Sambhavamyama atma mayaya Yada hi dharmasya Glanirbhavati Bharata Abhyuthanamadharmasya Tadatmanam srajamyaham Paritranaya sadhunam Vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Okay. So in the makeup of the teaching of the Vedas, which Bhagavad Gita is based on, the Bhagavad Gita is a restatement of the basic content of the Upanishad. In the Vedic thought, so two things are being pointed out, which as human beings we need to be conscious of. Two things. One is to understand the implications to myself between dharma and adharma. Dharma and adharma. What are the implications of things which are consist of adharma, which means something which is not righteous, which is not correct, and our conscience is a big. We should listen to our conscience on that. We can tell this is not right. I shouldn't be doing this. And so, but we still do it many times. And so we went into that in the third chapter where Arjuna asks that why is it that I keep doing things even I know they're wrong? And so we had a big discussion about that in the third chapter. I won't go into that. So, but just to point out, two things are required in one's life to make a lot of progress. One is to see the implication of dharma and adharma. What is the dharmic life? What is a righteous life? One which is correct. What does it buy me? So this is, for example, the very beautiful book by Swami Dayanandji, which was, it's called Value of Values. Really one of the, if you haven't really read it, you should. And in fact, it amplifies the basic aspects of the Bhagavad Gita, which we will cover at some point in time. I don't know when. This is in the 13th chapter. Amanitvam adambhitvam ahimsa kshantir arjavam. So there's like 5 verses. And so it is the amplification of those 5 verses of the Bhagavad Gita written by Swamiji about value of values. So the value of values means that until I see the value of dharmic life, I won't lead it. Why should I do it? And so this is one of the two things required from our lives, which is an understanding of dharma and adharma. And more importantly than that, because it leads to it, the distinction between knowledge and ignorance. Ajnanam and jnanam. What is jnanam? What is ajnanam? What are the implications of following ajnanam? And what are the results of following jnanam? This is what the Bhagavad Gita is. It is really just enunciation of those two things. So here, Arjuna had a problem with dharma. So this is what is called mohaha. So mohaha means that you are not clear about what is dharma and what is adharma. How? Because in fact the whole makeup of the first chapter is to see the moha of Arjuna. And what he see Arjuna's background was very clear. He was a very good person, and he wanted to make sure that he serves the society, he does things right, and he was determined to defeat the Kauravas. And yet his dharma became adharma when he saw some very close family members and teachers on the other side. And his resolve just dissolved. And his dharma became adharma. And he started to blabber and saying, maybe I should not really fight this war. When in fact it was all ordained that he will do it. He was trained for it. He himself participated and so on. So suddenly, because of certain moha, his dharma became adharma. You know, this is a lot of examples given in this, that sometimes, you know, we feel that I want to lead a truthful life, and I won't really do this, that, or the other. But certain circumstances come where you break that vow. Like, for example, you know, I'm just kicking out examples because it's what I see in the struggles of life are different types. You know, one of them is when your child becomes ready to go to college and you're not able to get a good college. And if supposing you have some money, I see this all the time. So your child wants to, wants to go to a good school, and you don't have the educational qualifications. So you approach the admissions department and say, what if I give you a building consisting of $200,000? So then they say, well, if you do that, we might take another look at your applicant. And I see this, some of my wife's clients who are very rich, and they all have struggling kids and so on. They do this. Otherwise, they are very, very righteous people. When it comes to some kind of a love, they say, you know what? What is my money for anyway? And this will create a good career for my child. So they break down their sense of righteousness for doing something. So this is exactly what happened to Arjuna. Arjuna's life was that I must defeat the Kauravas. But because of his love for some of the people that he saw, he says, I have to kill them, I can't do that. So then he just completely broke down. So Krishna pointed out, forget about jnanam, knowledge and so on. Dharma must be protected, dharma must be followed. You cannot and do not have the moha. Anyway, so that was the first chapter. Then as we saw that the second chapter is explaining that unless you lead a dharmic life, a righteous life, you cannot begin to understand the distinction between knowledge and ignorance. Cannot do that. It's just too subtle, and you would get confused, and you won't do that. So lead a life as, and then there was a question that is leading a righteous life more important, or is it the knowledge which is more important? The Krishna says these are not the same things. One leads to the other. One is an instrument, the other one is where you end up being. So the karma and the jnanam were discussed and so on. Then the karma was discussed in great length in the third chapter. As we saw, I'm just revising. Finally, Krishna is beginning to put the pendulum back into the very basics of knowledge, and with that, the fourth chapter begins. So here, one important thing to see, in the first few verses, Swami Maheshananji's, I was reading his book on the beginning of the 4th chapter, and he pointed this out very nicely. He said, you know, if you look at the nature of this study, of the self-knowledge and so on, one very important thing is this word sampradaya. Sampradaya. So sampradaya means a complete understanding of who is saying this and what is the relationship of this person who's saying is to the previous people. What's the basis of it? That connection has to be established in a very particular manner. This is called sampradaya. So what he's saying is that it often happens to us, you know. You happen to see a book review by someone, and we're all looking for new knowledge and new ideas and so on. And you pick up the book, and it looks very good. It looks very good. And so on. I'll give you one example, which may be controversial, okay? But it's a truth thing. Krishnamurti, J. Krishnamurti. I also was exposed to his books and thinking, and his thinking looks very interesting, very intelligent. Very insightful, and it was not until I began my serious study, which transformed my whole life. If you don't believe me, please ask my wife, who still complains about this, that how come you just got completely away from. It was not until I began my study that I realized that J. Krishnamurti doesn't make any sense. Doesn't have the sampradaya. He got it from some place, thought of it himself, make it kind of like a big to-do about it. And the more this was pointed out, it is something to be kept away. Don't even touch this. You do whatever you want to. I'm just telling you for myself. I just give you one example. J. Krishnamurti's sampradaya is missing. He got some from some guru here and there, and so on and so forth. Similarly, you find that there are authors of the Bhagavad Gita who do not. I'm sorry, I'm giving you all this. Even Radhakrishnans, no sampradaya. No sampradaya. Study from people that have a connection to Adi Shankara, to Ishvara, all the way, consistent, solid. This is called sampradaya. So in order to, so here I told you this last week, I think you may remember this, that the first 4 or 5 verses was to praise the Gita. So Maheshananji just pointed out, this is very beautiful, that really what Krishna is doing is providing you the authenticity of the sampradaya. So that's why the first verse of the 4th chapter, Imam vivasvate yogam proktavan aham avyayam vivasvan manave praha manurikshvakave manuhu ikshvakave bravid sampradaya. And this is, I'm very also just saying that any school of thought, any religion that only stops at a person in a certain century and says, I came up with this idea. Certainly I had a realization this is no sampradaya. Has to go all the way up from Ishvara itself. And within that sampradaya also there's lots of people who say, no, this is wrong. Cannot be wrong. So if they say that is wrong, so Ramanuja's Vishishta Advaita is one of those. And the same thing with Sikhism. Wrong. They came up with their own ideas that, then this, the way and they have some good thoughts in the sense that they found that the caste system was really being misused. So they completely throw away the caste system from their teaching. Caste system is very important. We have to, in fact, it will come in the 4th chapter. You cannot throw away the baby with the bathwater. You have to modify it. Yes, it is being misused, but that doesn't mean that the original ideas are not correct. So Sikhism, where you create a brand new Jainism, all of these are where you don't have the complete connection to Ishvara. So the sampradaya is very important. So these first few verses is to depict the sampradaya. That I taught this to Surya, and Surya taught this to Ikshvakava, and Raja. And then he says, Evam parampara praptim imam rajarshayo viduhu. He says this has been going on for a long time. And even in our study, for example, it is very important for us to see who are the commentators. And not only that, then you also have to see the teachers in front of you. What their lives have been? Who did they study with? What is the purpose of their studying? Is it to glorify themselves? Is it to have some kind of an ego? Or is it because there is some authenticity to the teaching and they're willing to... All of that has to be examined by you. Because it's very possible you can make mistakes. You certainly, and then we all do, we get involved with somebody who looks good, who has good thoughts and so on, but the connection to the very beginning is not there. So anyway, all of that is really the reason for the first few verses. So there we saw that, so that is the first 3 ones. Sa eva ayam maya te adya yogaha proktaha puratanaha. Number 3, bhaktosi me sakha cheti rahasyam hi etad uttamam. So all that was given. So now to prove, so now a new topic starts with number 4, which is Arjuna Uvacha. He says, wait a minute. Until now I thought I understood, but what are you saying to me? That you taught it to Surya, which is the very beginning of the whole creation in our galaxy? You're sitting there flesh and blood, meaning that you also get hungry like you do, and you also need to have food, and you can be injured by an arrow and so on. And how can you be the teaching? So he says, aparam bhavato janma param janma vivasvataha katham etad vijaniyam tvam adau proktavaniti. He says, how am I supposed to know that you are the one who taught? I don't get it. Something not quite right with this. So Arjuna has a smile on his face and he says, trust me. Trust me. I am telling you, I was the one. I was the one who took the form of teaching to the Surya. and I am the one who took this form. And so now the explanation of avatara and jiva is being given. And in the earlier class I gave this example, but I might as well give you the same example which I found recently. So beautiful. So please forgive me for the repetition for those of you that were in the earlier class. So this is the example. There's a man with a boy he was going with. And so they saw a scene where there was a man handcuffed and a policeman was carrying him. And so this boy said, "Father, what is going on here? There's a policeman who is nice right next to this guy holding his arm. And this fellow is kind of meek, and he says he's a thief. He's a thief, and so the thief needs some controlling factor so that he doesn't run away." So the boy said, "Oh, I see." Then they came upon a scene where there were two policemen with the thief. There was a person. And so the son said, "How come there are two policemen?" And so the father said, "Son, this guy is not an ordinary thief. He's a very violent thief. And he can create a lot of problems. So the government wants to make sure that he cannot run away at all. So there are people on both sides of it controlling him. He's a maha thief. He's a big thief." So the son said, "Oh, that makes sense." So then he found that the local Maharaja was going in a big procession, and surrounding him were 20 policemen. So this boy said, "My God, this guy must be an extraordinary thief. There are 20 policemen doing that." So his father smiled at him and he says, "No, this is his glory. Whenever he goes, the policemen are just go along with him, and then if there is any kind of a problem, they can do that, but they are not controlling him. They're not controlling him, they're controlling the crowds. And this is his mahima." Beautiful example. Really nice. So in this case, what happens is the difference between a jiva, like you and I, and an avatara is the difference between the thief who's surrounded by a couple of policemen controlling them, and the avatara who is surrounded by some policemen because he wants them that way, not because they are controlling him. Then I mentioned to you last time, which is also a very beautiful example, that the jiva is one who falls into a well and is trapped there, struggling, trying to make a life out of it. And an avatara who is also in the well. He's also in the well. But he has descended there with the help of a rope. And his idea is to tell this guy, "Stick to me and I will lift you up." So the avatara, avatra means one that descends. Beautiful example of the well. Means it is very deliberate. Very deliberate. And so Swami Maheshanand, by the way, has pointed out that Vyasa had said, please don't just think there's only 4 or 5 avatars. There are thousands of avatars. Ishvara descends in a variety of ways that you cannot imagine. Cannot even imagine. And sometimes they may take the form of a jiva, so that you can relate to them. You know, to me, I tell you, one of the most helpful avatars for me was Albert Einstein. I'll tell you, that just changed things for me completely, because the one problem I had with my understanding of Vedanta was I didn't understand that Akasha was as powerful as was pointed out by Einstein. I thought Akasha, which is space, is just inert. And I had Shraddha in the Vedanta. They're saying Akasha is not, there is a difference between subtlety and inertness. A very subtle thing like space can appear to be inert. So I had Shraddha, but it didn't really quite complete the analysis for me until I understood the explanation by Albert Einstein. And to me, I tell you, I'm just telling you this, Albert Einstein is an avatar of Ishvara. For me. And for others, I don't know, it's up to that. It opened my eyes. And I've already told this, there's so many different aspects to that. But the very explanation of how the space is curved was not clear to me until I started studying Albert Einstein. And I think I've told you this. What he said was that the example he gave was just phenomenal. He said the following. He said, look at it. So you have, supposing, a billiard table, or just an ordinary table, and you put into motion a ball across this table surface. It's a hard surface, and so the ball will go in a straight line more or less as you release it, and you reach there. This is example number one. The second example is that of a trampoline, which also is very taut and is very horizontal. The trampoline is, all the springs, etc., that make it very taut. But supposing you take a very heavy ball, what is it, bowling ball. Supposing you take a bowling ball and you put this across the trampoline, you know what will happen? Okay, no, wait a second, another thing. So what you do is you put a very heavy object, forget about the bowling ball. You take a very heavy object, supposing even a person is standing in the middle of the 150 pounds. And yesterday I was exercising, and I was lifting, to get my muscles up, I was lifting about 25 pounds, just to do this. So I saw this man, and he went straight away to a weight which is 110 pounds. And he was doing it like this, and I was struggling and so on and so forth. This guy, I walked up to him, I said, 110 is like a person. So he smiled at me, he says, yes. Imagine, my wife weighs 110 or 112 pounds. So imagine she's wearing a belt, so he would be putting her like this. It's just amazing how much strength it is. So anyway, going back to the trampoline, supposing there's a person standing there, 150 pounds, 160 pounds. So what will happen is, now imagine this, that the trampoline will be depressed at the point where this person is standing, okay? Now you throw a ball across the trampoline where the person is standing. You know what will happen? The ball, instead of going in a straight line, when it comes closer to the indentation, it will, depending on the velocity of the ball, it will go in a circle until it just goes into the thing. Einstein said, it suddenly dawned on me that this is exactly what the space does. So the space is like a trampoline. So what happens is when you have a heavenly body like the earth, okay, which is heavy in the space, now you have moon, which is like a ball that comes in. Instead of going across, it spins around the earth. Oh my God. That just blew my mind. I said, wow. And he says he blew his mind. He says when he imagined that, and then from that point on, he just went into so many explanations. So for example, the space is the recipient of all the fine forces of the world, gravitational forces, and all kinds of electromagnetic forces, sound. It's all in the space. All of a sudden, what Shastra has been saying began to make sense to me. That the space is the subtlest but the most powerful of the basic elements. And from there comes the Vayu, wind. And from there comes fire. From there comes Jalam. From there comes Prithvi. All of that will come later on. Avatara for me. So basically what Vyasa was saying, that please don't just look upon as 2 or 3 avatars, that Rama is an avatara and Krishna is an avatara and Kurma is an avatara and so on. He says no. There are anybody who comes in who really makes a dramatic difference in the way life is run, is done very deliberately by Ishvara. And one example that Swami Maheshananji gave is that your body, it has a self-correcting mechanism. That's the very basis of the Ayurveda. That really speaking, you shouldn't really need anything. You shouldn't need anything. But if something is required, you may need some external help. And even the dramatic help is also included in the body itself. Like, for example, supposing you cut yourself. You know, you didn't see the knife or something, and you cut it, and blood oozes out. Do you know what the body does? It starts to say, oh, this is not good. It starts to coagulate the blood so that it becomes solid and plugs the hole to a certain degree. So if it's a small one, you know, supposing you get a pinprick or something and blood comes out, you just don't do anything. Just sit there and watch it. And what will happen is the body comes up with some special things required for it to coagulate the blood. And pain, another thing is pain. Immediately the pain comes in and saying, please pay attention. Otherwise what will happen is, supposing you have, there is a hot plate and you touch the hot plate and there's no pain. So imagine what will happen. You put your hand down on a hot plate and there's no pain. Your hand will become like parotha within 10 seconds. That's it. But immediately you take your hand off because of pain. So the pain is a very important element. So what I'm saying there is that the body itself creates the antibody to correct the situation. So Swami Maheshananji also pointed this out. And you know, this is the reason you probably hear me say this about a dozen times in each class. Swami Maheshananji says, Swami Dayanandji says, Swami Chinmayanandji says. You know why? Sampradaya. Don't think that I'm just making it up. And all the Upanishads also say that we have heard this from the Acharyas. It's all Sampradaya. So there, Swami Maheshananji says the avatara is a special response to the problems of the creation. Just like an injury to your finger requires a special help. Because normally the antibodies or whatever I don't even know exactly how the coagulation occurs. But normally it is not required. Everything is flowing well. But if there is an injury to the particular thing, then the special thing says, oh, we gotta help this guy. And I was saying this earlier, I think the last class also, that they say that all of our disease things are already in our body. We have no idea that what health means is to have, there's a lot of fighting going on right now in each one of our bodies. There's things being attacked from all sides. But there are antibodies that are already fighting with them. And once in a while, when it becomes very difficult to maintain health, you may need external help. And in the Ayurveda, the external help is food, specialized food. You just need to, because we have mistreated food, and so you need some extra food. And now, with the help of the Western medicine, even most of the medicines are also nothing but specialized food itself. So you may need some external help to help out. The purpose of the avatara. So now we can go so we can say in number 5, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. So he basically says, no. I am an avatara. I am not a jiva. That's the basic difference between a jiva and an avatara. Jiva falls down and is based on the karma and is very limited. And in order to fulfill the karma phala, this is what our lot is. Avatara, on the other hand, is the one that deliberately comes in from time to time. So he says, Ajopi san avyaya atma, number 6, bhutanam ishwaropi san prakritim swam adhisthaya sambhavami atma mayaya. So he says, even though I am basically free from all the expressions of life, I am free from all of that, but this is my whole creation, and I take individual forms to help maintain it. So one very big thing out of the study of this whole thing is to understand that there is in fact a protector of the creation. This is a very big thing, because our basic thinking is that there is no one. who's in charge of running this whole show. It's all, everybody's on their own. And therefore, I should be on my own. This is the problem. But I think that through the study of Vedanta and the Bhagavad Gita, one begins to understand, no, there is a person who is in charge of it, and let me give myself up towards following this order. I may have problems and so on. Maheshanji gave a very beautiful example. This is a very real life example. He said, you know, he said once he was talking about this. He says, I was teaching a class, and there was a young girl who was really not a student. You know, sometimes the mothers bring their daughters and so on and so forth to go along with it in a class. So this daughter was brought her homework to do in this class. And Swamiji says, I was watching this scene. So what happened was that this daughter had a cloth bag. And in the cloth bag was her homework. And it had some pencils and all kinds of stuff because she was doing some artwork and so on. And the cloth bag had one side which was completely open. And as she was coming in, her mother was not there yet. She picked up the cloth bag from the closed end and dropped everything on the floor through the open end. Swamiji says, I was watching her. She became panicky. You know, I hope my mother doesn't see it. So she started to scramble and started to put everything back into the, and she managed to do that. She put it into the bag and so on. But Swamiji says, I was watching her. She was saying, oh my God, what did I do? Swamiji said, I was thinking, why does it have to happen that way? This is a very pleasant thing that happens all the time. It's not her fault that one side was open. Why does she have to be afraid of her mother? But what happens is, she must know this, that the mother will say, you fool, you'll never learn. You gave all kinds of, this is the problem that we create all kinds of things. You're so stupid. Why did you do all of this? Why don't you be more careful next time? So Swamiji says, this is our issue. We are afraid of the world. And this is a pleasant thing. Let things happen as they do. And the mother also really should be very careful to just smile. I give a lot of kudos to my wife one time when we were in PRC. I still remember this scene very well. So it was winter time, so we were having lunch. And I had two kids with me in the PRC. So my younger one at that time was 4. He's over 40 now, but he was 4 years old at that time. And so somebody brought him back from the school, and we were all having lunch with Swamiji was sitting on the front, and my wife was there, and so on. And Manoj came in, and he whispered something to his mom, and said, like this: he had forgotten his jacket in school. And my wife just hugged him and said, it's okay, no problems. We'll get it back tomorrow. So he says, what if I lose it? He says, we'll lose it, it's lose it. And they had this conversation with the earshot of Swamiji. I was sitting on the other side. Swamiji called everybody and said, look at this woman, how she behaved with her son. This is the way we should do that. Do not scold your children at any time, unless you have to do it, and you probably don't have to do it at any time. So what if he lost it? So what's the big thing? She just sort of clapped for my wife. And I was sitting there feeling very jealous. Maybe I shouldn't. I probably would have scolded him a little bit. This is what the fathers do, you know. We always, mothers and fathers are very different. So Swami Maheswaranji says that really speaking, you should discover. So just look at this example. So if there is a child who knows that my mom is very loving, then the mess that you create, you won't have fear as part of that. You will still, it's a mess. It's a little mess. You could drop everything and then you have to put everything back and so on and so forth. No big problem. But the sense of fear is unnecessary. So Swamiji Maheswaranji said, in this, I'm telling you, this is the commentary in these verses. He says that one thing that we should do is to understand that Ishvara, who is both my mother and father, doesn't expect to scold me. I should lead a life of, responsibility, and if things don't go right, it's no big problem. Just start, keep making progress, per se. So this is the one thing that I think in the understanding of Vedanta that comes in. And if you look at me personally, it took me a while, because you will start with the feeling as you grow up that the world is antagonistic to you. You have to struggle. You have to find your own place. There is no one in charge. But the more that the study did for me was to totally convince me. It took a little while that I am taken care of. I should just do what I need to do. Don't waste time in complaining and fear and all of those kinds of things, because now my understanding is very firm in my mind that there is a person in charge, and I just need to recognize that. And so through all of these things about avatars and so on and so forth, this is all part of the reasoning, how I got convinced that there is something. And it starts by having a sense of belief, but the more you study it, how consistent, how comprehensive, how complete this is, you begin to have more understanding, not just faith, that yes, there's something funny going on in here. Anyway, so, and then in number 7, he gives an idea of when do I take a shape as an avatara? Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyutthanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijami aham. And in fact, the two verses should be looked at together. Number 7 and 8. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. So it's very simple. It's really not all that difficult to understand. He says, I take shape when the body of this creation is in trouble. Exactly, I tell you, it's not any different from when you cut yourself. Same thing. It's not like, how does this happen? No. But when you cut yourself, Until you cut yourself, there is no specialness. The coagulation of the blood is not necessary. An external help is not necessary. No surgery is necessary. Things are going on well. But if your body gets into trouble, first of all, the internal structure itself takes a special form to help you, coagulation of the blood. I remember another example, I remember this so well. When I was working for IBM, I think I might have told you this, I'm sorry if this is a repetition. When I was working for IBM in mid-60s, a long time ago, I was a young man and I would take any new classes about things and so on and so forth. So there was a talk given by a person that has been so helpful to me, so helpful. And he was talking about public speaking. And he said, you know, I want to tell you something. So very useful. He said that everyone gets nervous before public speaking. You know, if you're talking to a couple of friends and you're relaxed, but supposing you have to give a talk to 500 people, you get nervous. So he says, the thing you need to understand is that the nervousness before public speaking is very healthy. So we all said, this is what? How can it be healthy? He says, yes. You know what it is, he says? It is the natural response of your ecosystem, your body, your mind, and so on, to get ready for a big show. He says, if you don't do that, what will happen is you will just be too casual. And you cannot be too casual when you're talking to 500 people. You have to really frame your thoughts carefully. What should I say first? You don't do that when you're just talking to friends. You just say ha ha and just have fun. But when you're talking about, so a lot of people have come to listen to you, you've got to structure your thoughts. And that requires focus. And that means there is a certain tension involved in doing so. So he says, don't be afraid of tension. It's really the natural response. I tell you, that was marvelous. What a great thing as I put that into practice in my life. And just the other day, my older granddaughter was competing for a swimming meet, and I gave her the same advice. It takes a while. So I said, Arya, her father, my son, was telling me that she gets nervous. And she's a very good swimmer. She's doing very well. But she gets nervous before each of the swim meets. And so I said, I'll have a talk with her. So I pulled her aside one day, and Arya, you know, the nervousness is actually very healthy because it gets you get ready for this and so on and so forth. I don't know. She has to internalize it on her own. Everybody has to do that. But so the point is that the whole body of the whole creation requires help from time to time. And so what it means is that it appears that we are rudderless. You elect a president that is doing strange things and you do all kinds of, but it will be okay. It'll be taken care of. And yet, I think that you're right. It is very possible that in the case of, you know, really heart-rending, if you've heard some of the talks from thoughts about what has happened in ISIS, in Iraq, and Mosul, and some of the sexual trauma that these girls have been going through. So it's not as though it's all very pleasant or anything like that. But that's all part of the karma phala and the karma of our people and how it happens. And so overall, though, it'll be okay. Swami Mahesanji gives a very interesting example. He said, you know, I mean, this is not to condone violence or anything like this. So one very interesting thing, which is a little bit of a departure from what we are studying, is the following fact. Some of the criticism that people have against this Sarvatma Bhava, and our friends Jains also feel the same way. They feel that you cannot have a Sarvatma Bhava of Ishvara, that Ishvara is the Atma of everyone. You cannot do that. And one of the reasons they say that is that you and I have some dukkha in our lives, some problems, pain, suffering, etc. Each one of us has it. So Ishvara, if he's the Sarvatma Bhava of everyone, imagine his dukkha. They say that cannot be true. This is one of the reasons people criticize Vedanta, that you cannot have Ishvara, who is the combination of everyone. Imagine if your and my dukkhas are there, how much more it will be for Ishvara? No. For several reasons. One is, it's exactly that same example of the thief with one policeman and a Raja with 20 policemen. The policemen are not to give, they are there for a dukkha for a thief, but not for the Raja. Their presence is there, but it's not, doesn't encompass it. This is one of the things, which is the truth about it. So the Ishvara is not under the control of dukkha. He knows that there is individual dukkha, which was the karma phala of the individuals. Another thing which is pointed out very beautifully is that suppose you have an army that is fighting a war. And in the army, you have 5 or 6 soldiers that were killed. And the army, even more than that, let's say 100 soldiers that were killed. And the army consists of 5,000 people. And the army won the battle. They won the war. Isn't the overall sense that we won, even though 100 people got killed and you have their burial and their cremation, and so you give them, but the overall sense is that things are going well. We did well, and so on and so forth. So no, Ishvara is not under the spell of dukkha in any way. So please do not criticize Sarvatmatvam, because that's not the reality. In fact, the Ishvara is in charge of the whole show, no doubt about it. So going back to this, yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyuthanam adharmasya tadatmanam sujamiyaham. So now we come to number 8. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanayartham sambhavami yuge yuge. So 2 things to be talked about here. One is the 3 things that are done or attempted to be done by the avatara. One is to protect the sadhus. The second one is to punish the ones who create problems. And in doing so, maintaining the order of the universe. Okay? So, first of all, let's look at each one of them. Paritranaya sadhunam. means that the sadhus, so here the sadhu is defined to be a person who follows dharma. He follows dharma. He does not really compromise in any way. Here, my example of my own father comes in. I tell you, it's very interesting. I think about him a lot. So he was a very interesting person. He did not have any understanding of Ishvara. In my discussions with him, he was not a religious person. Just look at the character of the person. Not a religious person. My mother was, but my father was, he was very skeptical. I don't know if there is an Ishvara. I don't know. He was not against it. He just was not convinced. He had never really studied it. But he was a sadhu. So it is possible to be a sadhu without an understanding of Ishvara. This is what I learned from him. How was he a sadhu? He's absolutely a complete gentleman. Always on time. One of the reasons, one of the aspects of not being a sadhu is not being punctual. Well, what difference does it make? Let people wait. Doesn't matter to me. It's a crime. You may not be able to make it on time, but the objective should be on time. If you tell someone, I want to be there at 7 o'clock, he used to drive my mother crazy. 20 minutes before that, he says, you know, we're getting to be late. So she says, so what? So we're getting to be late. He says, no, we have promised them we'll be there. I tell you, when he passed away, so I couldn't reach there in time for his cremation, but I reached there 3 or 4 days later. So my mom asked me to make the main speech for my father. I was the oldest son, and so I consulted with everybody. I asked my mom, what should I say about him, and my sister, and so on. And my mother said, his timing was more accurate than Indian Standard Time. When he would have tea in the afternoon, you knew it was 3 o'clock. Sadhu. Never hurt anybody with a bad word. Just a wonderful person, but didn't have an understanding of Ishvara. So sadhu is the one where dharma is most important. So he says that my first job is to protect the sadhu. Now Swami Maheshananji pointed out, and I'll almost end with this because we're running out of time. Swami Maheshananji says that vinashaya cha duskritam means I also punish the ones who do not do things correctly. Why is that necessary? Swami Maheshananji gives a very beautiful example. He said, supposing you got invited to somebody's home, okay? And then the host says, would you like to drink something? So you can ask someone, would you like to have some soft drink, water, or nimbu pani, or something like this? So then you say, no, maybe just water is enough, that's all. And the person accepts it. Supposing the fellow asks you, do you want some wine or alcohol? And you say, no, I don't drink. So the person says, why not? What's wrong with it? You don't believe in wine and alcohol? So he starts to blame you. So Swamiji says, look at this. He does not blame you for refusing a cold drink. If you just want Coke and you say, no, I don't want any Coke, then he doesn't say, why not? What's wrong with Coke? But if he offers you whiskey and you refuse whiskey, he starts to berate you. What's wrong with it? These are the things you should do. Why don't you have wine? Why don't you have whiskey? He says, this is what is called dushkrita. Dushkrita. That good things are taken care of. But this is a great thing. Swami Dayanand used to say the same thing. He says, very interestingly enough, there's a beauty in all of this. When there is some truth involved, no one berates you. No one asks you to do something by itself. Like, for example, have you ever seen a person knock on your door and he says, tuck, tuck, tuck. He says, yes, what do you want? Oh, I'm a professor at physics in Stanford. Yes. I want to see if there are some students in Stanford University for physics. Can I come in and tell you about this? It will not happen. It will not happen. Instead, what will happen is some Jehovah's Witness guy will come in and say, we have a brand of Christianity which will blow your mind. Can I come in to talk to you about it? So Swami Dayanand used to say that one who is very secure about the religious aspects will not bother you. But one who wants more company because he himself is not secure wants to bother you. And so this is why Swamiji used to say that. He says, people do not like to drink alone. This is why they say the more people that have alcohol, the better, because they themselves are not sure this is the right thing for me to do. In fact, they are sure that it is not the right thing for me to do. But if somehow you have 5 other people that are also drinking alcohol, you feel I'm okay. This is the Swami Maheshanji gave this example. He says, saying that paritranaya sadhunam is not enough. Vinashaya cha dushkritam is also necessary. That you need to make sure. And so nowadays it has come to a point where from keeping alcohol completely away, drugs and alcohol and so on, this has become a part and parcel of our life. And if this goes any further, some avatara will have to come. Will have to come. And there he says another interesting thing, I'll finish with that, yuge yuge. So as you know, there are 4 yugas in a kalpa. A kalpa is, I believe, I don't know, I'm not very clear about that. I used to know this very clearly. But let's say that is 1,000 million years, I think, is a kalpa, or something like that. I forget that. Let's say 100 million. So a kalpa is divided into 4 yugas. And it goes back and forth. So it's a circle. So one of them is called Satya Yuga. Right? Then the second one is called Treta Yuga. The third one is called Dwapara Yuga. And the fourth one is called Kali Yuga. The Satya Yuga is the purest, where alcohol and drugs are not even known at all. It is only all goodness. Dharma prevails. Then slowly, slowly it starts, and this is what exactly he says. In fact, what is it? I think it's number 3, wasn't it? No, number 2. Evam parampara praptim imam rajarshayo viduhu saha kalena iha mahata yogaha nashtaha parantapa. That even though I taught it to Surya, at that time it was a Satya Yuga, but over the period of time, slowly, slowly, it starts to diminish. And now we have Kali Yuga. And the Kali Yuga is the worst of the 4, and we are right in the middle of it. We're not at the worst of the Kali Yuga yet. It's going to come. But then again, the circle will go back to Satya Yuga. This is how it will happen. So in the Kali Yuga, then you find that adharma is very prevalent. Very prevalent. Even families will say, hey, what's wrong with cheating? Everybody else cheats. Here Swami Maheshananji has pointed out, this is something we'll discuss it in more detail. I'm running out of time. He said, you know, one of the things we should really understand very clearly is people saying, Swamiji, you know, you have to be corrupt, doing vyavahara. You cannot make things, you know, you have to be, corruption is to be accepted. He says, please see, the corruption is to be accepted is the downfall of your own dharma. When you accept it as inevitable, then you're postponing you're no longer a sadhu. No longer a sadhu. Again, my dad, for example, he would never, I mean, he was lucky in the sense he was born at a time where India was not that corrupt. But he wouldn't even think about giving someone a special thing. He would wait in line. What a wonderful sadhu. I'm very happy for having lineage like this. And that was his life. And so, really speaking, the Kali Yuga is where we now just routinely accept it. And it is not right, because it will just postpone our understanding of ourselves. Because you cannot be a jnani unless you are a sadhu. Very important. Anyway, I didn't leave much time for questions, but I'll be happy to take some after the prayer, and we'll continue with this in that sense. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Nrityo Ma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Happy to answer some questions. Yes?
On this Sampradaya, Adi Shankara followed the Sampradaya.
Yes.
Did Buddha follow Sampradaya?
So Buddha, see, from the perspective of Vedantic study, if someone goes away from the Vedic, that means that there was some misunderstanding of their, So it's not as though that people are not very smart or intelligent and so on, but some things happen in their lives where they don't follow the teaching in the way it should be followed. And it happened. This is the way it is. So in the case of Buddha, for example, he rejected the Vedas.
And he doesn't mention anything about knowledge starting with the sun, or
No, nothing at all. Absolutely not. So his understanding may be helpful partially, but we don't think it is completely helpful. No. In fact, the conclusion, and part of it is that we are, in the case of Buddhism, the original aspects of Buddha are not that well preserved. And so, unlike Vedanta, where the books and so on and so forth, despite being under the fire from the British and the Muslims and so on, are still intact. We've lost a lot. What is it they say, that out of thousands of Upanishads, only like 200-300 are remaining. But those are enough. Those preserve the core. But in the case of Buddhism, what has happened is there's been a lot of succession of ideas, and the original core of Buddhism may or may not be, we don't know. So it's very possible that the thinking of Buddha may have been very Vedic in that sense, but we don't know for sure, not for sure. So certainly the present conclusions of the Buddhist thinking is not correct. That everything is just mind games and there is no Atma and so on and so forth. It doesn't make any sense at all. Yeah, sorry.
Well, similarly then, what about the example of Sri Ramana Maharshi? Because he also didn't necessarily have the...
So in the case of Ramana Maharshi, from his writings, Saddarshanam and some of the other texts and so on, his vision is very accurate, very complete. What he lacked was the very technical understanding of Shastra. So he was not a great teacher, but he had a very good vision for himself, and he taught a few people as much as they can. But so this is what is called Shrotriya Brahmanishta. So he was a Brahmanishta, but not necessarily a Shrotriya. So he had a good understanding, but because of his previous birth, he was able to see things very clearly without having a systematic study per se. But his books and writings and his relationships with others, highly respected. He's absolutely clear about what it is and so on. But on the other hand, he does not follow the sampradaya of Adi Shankara in the sense that he has to first understand the basics, then question it systematically and so on. That he did not do. He didn't have the opportunity to do so. Sorry. Ramanand?
Not very clear about Vinasha. What is it that is being described?
So Vinasha here means that the attitude of the people not in consistence with dharma, there will be pressures to change it. So what it means is that adharma will not be accepted. That's the vinasha. In fact, this talks about, and Swami Maheshananji points it out very well, beautifully well. I'll hopefully discuss it. So that's a good question. He says vinasha has two forms. One is to convert a adharmi into a dharmi. And the other one is, when that's not possible, to completely negate that person. That means that, but no way should it be accepted. No should it be. It should be pure dharma in our life. So in that sense, for example, the done one we gave to about the person who's putting pressure on you, why don't you drink? So supposing I had my 12-year-old son with me, and he doesn't know what drinking is or anything like this, but supposing somebody says this to me, then I would probably have a word with him and saying, son, here's the situation. If it was so natural, why would he put pressure on me? So I will teach him. So this is a vinasha of the dushkritam. Criticism of the bad and acceptance of the good is a form of a vinasha, in a very minor form, yeah. Yeah, Shilpa?
Just a little bit confusion to the whole, probably the vinasha, I think. So a lot of things that have happened in past century or so, your Holocaust and the Japanese, what they have done with Chinese, and even currently there are so many documentaries about organ harvesting. They use Taoist people to harvest the organs.
Yes.
Whatever. So this is very highly destructive on so many levels.
Correct.
So if those people who are conducting these type of things, they don't feel bad about themselves, that they feel that this is the right thing to do, to harvest organs, because they have different beliefs. So how did that work out? This is just, and if they get punished in some of the life, then what about now? This is just.
So I think there are a couple of things to be said about it. One is that, as we were discussing, you were in the previous class also, that ultimately it becomes a personal quest of ours. What is it that I need to do in my life for myself, in my own attitudes and so on? What do I believe in? What do I go with? What do I follow? This is the one thing that's important. And the second thing is that we are of the understanding that this is a continuous flow of many lives. So the problems created here doesn't mean that they escape from it. They'll get their punishment in the due course, one form or the other. And so there's nothing to do with me. This is exactly goes back to the original form, that to the best extent that I can change things, let me change things. But I know that there is a higher power responsible for how things are being run. And let people be responsible for their own, so on and so forth. So that does not create, in my mind at least, yes, there's a lot of bad things that are happening and so on, but I don't get frustrated by that. I feel sympathy, but I feel there is somebody else who's taking care of it. There's nothing that I feel should bad about it. What I am responsible for is my life, how I act, how I behave. If I'm able to help someone, what can I do that? But at a macro level, I also feel that there is nothing unanswered. There is no interruption of justice. This is all part of a long-term kind of a thing. There's something like that. Would be my first level of. We need to spend more time in satsangs and so on, because I know you have questions and I'd like to. But so maybe I should reduce the teaching time to 1 hour, and then so we will do. One last thing, I find that there's some changes in some new students that come in. Please send me an email so that I want to make sure that you are on the roster. And the only reason I say that is because sometimes classes get canceled and I still get people saying I showed up and there wasn't anybody there. And so I want to maintain that there's a roster. So please write to me and give me your names and so on. Okay, all right, thank you.